ex-FBI analyst kept classified information in her home, gets sentenced to basically 4 years in federal prison. Let's put up the picture full mass. Kendra Kingsbury actually had a hell of a story, sympathetic, some would say. But it did not spare her from the 4 years handed down by the federal judge because she did in fact violate law in relation to classified documents. Keep a picture up. She did not engage in obstruction of justice. She did not engage in willful obstruction at all, according to the charge docket. Former Federal Bureau of Investigation agent Kendra Kingsbury was sentenced to 46 months in prison. This happened on Wednesday after pleading guilty to 2 counts of willful retention of classified documents. Crimes mirror 31 of the 37 charges that former President Donald Trump faces in respect to classified documents. Trump, who was indicted earlier this month and arraigned last Tuesday, is facing 37 counts ranging from willful retention of classified documents to obstruction as well, in connection to the DOJ's investigation into his handling of classified documents after leaving office. He's the first former president to face federal charges in United States history. The indictment, which was brought by the DOJ special counsel Jack Smith, accuses Trump of mishandling sensitive presidential records and obstructing government efforts to retrieve them. Trump has maintained his innocence, accusing federal prosecutors of investigating him for political reasons. The agent, Ms. Kingsbury, worked for the Kansas City FBI office as an analyst from 2004 until 2017. The reason why this is important is because clearly she is one of their own. She held top secret security clearance and had access to national defense classified information. That's according to the press release from the DOJ. Agent Kingsbury was prohibited, just like anyone else, from bringing the classified information to her home, but pleaded guilty in 2022 after admitting she repeatedly removed sensitive government materials from the FBI and kept them at her home, including classified documents related to national defense. The press release said this agent unlawfully and willfully retained 386 classified documents. The FBI also found more than 300 documents with classified markings at Trump's Mar-a-Lago resort, right? Golliff and said that Kingsbury mere possession of the documents in an improper way warranted federal prosecution, just the possession alone. However, many of the documents in her possession were in electronic format, and she was not accused of using the materials to harm national security. She was not charged with obstruction of justice. Print documents were discovered at Trump's residence, and the former president also faces an obstruction charge. Now, this is interesting because obviously Donald Trump was already in possession of classified documents that he never had the clearance to keep in his home. There's a former FBI agent who has now been prosecuted, pleaded guilty, received a sentence of almost 4 years in prison because of holding the documents. Now, President Obama said in an interesting interview that basically it's not ideal that Donald Trump is being prosecuted, being a former president and all, but it does undergird one notion, that no one is above the law. Well, at least not above all of the laws. All right, this is going to be an interesting dynamic to see how the right spins this, because I have not heard anyone from the right calling this a political prosecution. I have not heard anyone from the right say, well, why is she being prosecuted for something that was, not really a big deal? Nothing bad happened. She did not try to compromise national security. It was a mistake. Her defense argued that she had death in the family. She had a medical crisis. She was having some problematic dynamics happening that year. That was noted for the record. Those were facts presented during the case. It did not matter. She was in violation of the rule. She was in violation of the law. She actually took her lumps like a woman, and she's going to serve her time. Trump would never do so quietly. All right, dear brother, what are your thoughts here?
Another point to jump in on what you were just saying is that the Republican Party would never defend Kendra Kingsbury for this reason: A, because she doesn't get votes, and B, because she kind of makes a mess of their entire theory that, okay, regular people will get prosecuted with this. Why isn't Hillary, for example, they were trying to say? They can do the same thing, and using her as an example as being someone who's prosecuted, but apply the same thing to Trump. And the last and most important thing here to also highlight is that Donald Trump is also being charged of obstructing justice in this case, because he was asked to give the documents and he didn't give them back. And so that actual implicit sort of breaking the law and then trying to hide that you broke the law again is putting him in even deeper trouble. So if anything, this case should prove out to be, not a complete one-to-one, but something that is indicative that Trump could get it worse, or at least deserves it so. Let's see if he pulls another trick again.
You make a really great point about the difference, the distinction, because obviously obstruction is worse than simply making a mistake and carrying something to your house. Donald Trump engaged in willful obstruction after the government asked for the documents back, then mandated them back, then ordered them back. He decided not to give them back. All right, here's what President Obama said.
How is the rest of the world, the democratic world, maybe even the non-democratic world, meant to interpret that indictment, and indeed the fact that a federal indictee is able to run for the highest office in the land, maybe even the world?
It's less than ideal, right? But the fact that we have a former president who is having to answer to charges brought by prosecutors does uphold the basic notion that nobody's above the law. And the allegations will now be sorted out through a court process. I think I'm more concerned when it comes to the United States with the fact that not just one particular individual is being accused of undermining existing laws, but that more broadly we've seen, whether it's through the gerrymandering of districts, whether it's trying to silence critics through changes in legislative process, whether it's attempts to intimidate the press, a strand of anti-democratic sentiment that.
Yeah, that actually started President Obama. In all due respect, under your leadership, more should have been done. Let's be very clear about the reality of Donald Trump. Donald Trump, he may get convicted. There is no ambiguity about his ability to run for president while being charged. He absolutely can. When convicted, there's an interesting caveat here. Conviction of espionage states that you can no longer hold a position of public trust. Being on the board of directors, that's a position of public trust. Being an elected official, a judge, a president, is a position of public trust. He may fight that notion if it comes down to it. Then he has another hurdle to overcome. That's called ballot access. Because all Republican states have this rule that says basically if you are on probation or parole for a felony, you cannot vote and you cannot run for political office. How do you put a man on the ballot to run for president when your citizens are unable to participate because they have the same legal dilemma as Trump? And then number three, the Republican National Committee is a company just like the Democratic Party or the DNC. These are companies. These companies have a board of directors. They have the ability to override the will of the delegates. It's called a brokered convention. The Republicans can do that too.